I'm Brooke Matthews, 32 years old, software developer from Boston. 6 months ago, my Uncle Warren passed away, leaving me his entire fortune, $7.2 million. When my parents faced financial ruin, I invited them to live in my new suburban home, hoping to finally build the close family bond I'd always craved. Then came that accidental phone call. They forgot to hang up, and I heard the truth. Living with him is awful, but we're only staying because of his money. My sister's laughter cut deeper than their words. Before I share my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever discovered someone wasn't who you thought they were. Now, let me tell you how it all began. Growing up in Boston, I was the kid who always had his nose in computer books while my parents pushed me toward medicine. Our modest two-bedroom home in the Dorchester neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable enough. Mom worked as a nurse at Massachusetts General, and Dad managed a small insurance office downtown. We weren't poor, but money was always a topic of tension in our household. Uncle Warren was the black sheep of the family, my dad's older brother, who made his fortune in early internet startups. While my parents called him irresponsible and lucky, he saw something in me that they never did. When I was 12, he gave me my first computer, a bulky beige machine that changed my life forever. "Brooke," he told me, his eyes gleaming with excitement, "the future belongs to the builders, the ones who can speak the language of computers." My bedroom became a sanctuary of coding and creation, much to my parents' dismay. "Computers are just a fad," my father would say at dinner. "Medicine is where stability is, where respect is." My mother would nod in agreement, then inevitably turn the conversation to my sister Stephanie's accomplishments. Stephanie was 3 years older, and the Golden Child Student Council president, straight-A student, and eventually pre-med at Boston University. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my teenage years. Each time Stephanie brought home another award or accolade, my parents would beam with pride, while my interest in programming was treated as a childish hobby at best, a waste of potential at worst. When I was accepted to Boston University on a partial scholarship, my parents finally seemed proud until they learned I planned to study computer science instead of pre-med. The argument that followed left wounds that never fully healed. "We didn't sacrifice everything for you to waste your life playing with computers," my father shouted, his face flushed with anger. "It's not playing, Dad. It's building the future," I tried to explain, but they couldn't or wouldn't understand. As a compromise, I started in pre-med but spent every free moment in the computer lab. After 2 miserable years maintaining a GPA just high enough to keep my scholarship while being deeply unhappy, I made the decision that would estrange me from my parents for years. I dropped out to take a coding job at a startup. My parents' reaction was nuclear. "You're throwing your life away," my mother cried. My father was more direct. "Don't come asking for help when this all falls apart." The only family member who stood by me was Uncle Warren. He didn't just support my decision. He mentored me, introduced me to industry connections, and occasionally slipped me grocery money when the startup's paychecks were thin. Those early years were brutal. My apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up with unreliable heat, about 300 square feet of space that I could barely afford. Dinner was often ramen noodles or whatever was on sale. I worked 80-hour weeks, learning, building, failing, and trying again. My parents' calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether for a while. When we did speak, conversations were strained, focused on how well Stephanie was doing in medical school. During this time, I met Natalie Reynolds at a tech meetup. Beautiful, ambitious, and seemingly supportive of my dreams, she felt like a beacon of hope during a dark time. For almost 2 years, we built what I thought was a solid relationship. She'd bring me coffee during late-night coding sessions and listen to my ideas with genuine interest. But as my startup struggled, and then eventually folded, her patience wore thin. "I need someone with direction, Brooke," she said the night she left. "Someone who's actually going somewhere. I can't keep waiting for your big break." Her departure hurt, but it was my best friend Marcus Wilson who helped me see the truth. We'd been friends since freshman orientation at BU, and unlike my family or Natalie, his support never wavered. "Some people only want to be there for the harvest," Marcus told me over beers at our favorite dive bar. "They don't have the stomach for the planting season. They're lost, man." Marcus was right. The next startup I joined did better, and I moved up quickly from junior developer to team lead. Still, my parents remained unimpressed. During obligatory holiday visits, They'd introduce me to family friends as our son who works with computers with the same enthusiasm, one might say. Our son who collects bottle caps. Uncle Warren, meanwhile, had sold his company for 9 figures and started 2 more successful ventures. He'd check in regularly, review my code, and offer advice both technical and personal. Your parents come from a different world, he'd tell me. They value security and status. They don't understand that taking risks is how you build something meaningful. Every 6 months or so, I'd make attempts at reconciliation calls, emails, even surprise visits. But each interaction followed the same pattern. Initial politeness followed by subtle digs at my career choice, culminating in some comparison to Stephanie's real job saving lives as a now-practicing physician. Your sister just bought a beautiful condo in Beacon Hill, my mother mentioned during one particularly painful Christmas dinner. Doctor's salary, she added with a pointed look at me. I was 30 at the time, finally making 6 figures. But in their eyes, I was still the family disappointment. Through it all, Uncle Warren remained my champion, reminding me that success isn't measured by others' yardsticks. Build something that matters to you, Brooke, he'd say. The rest will follow. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how dramatically my relationship with my family was about to change. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning in April. Uncle Warren, just 63 years old, had suffered a massive heart attack at his lake house and couldn't be revived. The news hit me like a physical blow, this man who believed in me when no one else did, gone without warning. The funeral was held at an elegant downtown chapel, packed with business associates, friends, and family members, some of whom I barely recognized. I noticed how many young entrepreneurs came to pay their respects, people whose careers Uncle Warren had championed, just as he had mine. While I sat numb with grief in the front row, I couldn't help but notice my parents and Stephanie huddled together, speaking in hushed tones and occasionally glancing toward Warren's attorney, Leonard Goldman. After the service, Leonard approached me. "Warren spoke of you often, Brooke. He was incredibly proud of you," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "There will be a reading of the will tomorrow at my office. Your presence is requested." I nodded, unable to form words through my grief. As Leonard walked away, my father suddenly appeared at my side, the first time he'd voluntarily approached me in years. "Such a tragedy," he said, his voice carrying an unusual warmth. "Your uncle was a remarkable man. You two were close, weren't you?" The sudden interest felt strange, but I was too emotionally drained to analyze it. "He was more than an uncle to me," I managed to say. Yes, of course," my father replied, patting my back awkwardly. "We should catch up soon. It's been too long." The next day, I sat in Leonard Goldman's wood-paneled office alongside my parents, Stephanie, and 2 of Uncle Warren's business partners. Leonard adjusted his glasses and began reading the will in a solemn, measured tone. To my nephew, Brooke Matthews, who understood my vision and shares my passion for building the future, I leave my entire estate, including all property, financial assets, and my controlling shares in Matthews' digital innovations. The room fell silent. Leonard continued listing the assets. The lake house valued at $1.8 million, investment accounts totaling just over $5 million, art and collectibles worth approximately $400,000, and company shares valued at approximately $22 million. I felt dizzy. While I knew Uncle Warren was wealthy, I had no idea he had planned to leave everything to me. I looked up to see my parents' and sisters' faces frozen in identical masks of shock. "This can't be right," Stephanie finally said, breaking the silence. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Miss Matthews," Leonard replied firmly. "Warren was very clear about his wishes. He revised this will just last year and was of completely sound mind." The drive home was a blur. I needed space to process not just my grief, but this overwhelming responsibility that had been placed on my shoulders. I didn't hear from my family for 3 days, then suddenly they were calling daily. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet when she called that Saturday. "Brooke, darling, we've been thinking about you. This must be such a difficult time. Would you like to come for dinner tomorrow? I'm making your favorite pot roast." I accepted the invitation, partly out of curiosity about this sudden change in attitude. The dinner was surreal. My parents asked detailed questions about my work for the first time ever, and Stephanie, who had barely acknowledged my career choice before, suddenly wanted to hear all about the fascinating world of tech entrepreneurship. As coffee was served, My father cleared his throat nervously. "Son, there's something we should probably tell you. We've been facing some challenges." The story spilled out. Dad had invested heavily in a friend's restaurant chain that went bankrupt during the pandemic. They had remortgaged their house to cover the losses, and now the bank was threatening foreclosure. Mom had been picking up extra shifts at the hospital, but at 61, the physical toll was becoming too much. "We hate to burden you with our problems during your time of grief," Mom said, reaching for my hand. "But we're family, and families face challenges together." I felt a complex mix of emotions, suspicion about the timing, but also a small, persistent hope that maybe this could be a fresh start. Maybe through adversity, we could finally build the relationship I'd always wanted with them. "Why don't you move in with me?" I heard myself say. "I'm closing on Uncle Warren's lake house next week. It's over 5,000 square feet, plenty of room for all of us until you get back on your feet." The relief on their faces seemed genuine. "We couldn't possibly impose," my mother said, even as her eyes lit up. "It's not an imposition," I insisted. "It's what family does." 2 weeks later, I helped them move into the lake house. It was a stunning property on Lake Winnipesaukee with soaring ceilings, a gourmet kitchen, and panoramic water views. I gave them the primary suite with its luxury bathroom and private deck, taking a smaller bedroom for myself. "This is just temporary," my father assured me as they unpacked, "just until we sort out our finances." Those first few weeks felt like the family experience I'd always craved. We had dinner together every night, sharing stories and catching up on lost time. Mom took over the kitchen, preparing elaborate meals. Dad seemed interested in my work, asking questions about the company I'd inherited. Stephanie visited frequently, sometimes staying for days at a time. For the first time in my adult life, I felt accepted by my family. The past hurts began to fade as I basked in their apparent pride and affection. I started to believe that perhaps Uncle Warren's final gift wasn't just financial security, it was the chance to heal old wounds and create the family bond I'd always longed for. How wrong I was. The first hint that something wasn't right came about a month after my parents moved in. I returned home early from a meeting to find my mother giving what appeared to be a house tour to 3 women I'd never met before. "And this Italian marble was imported specifically for the kitchen renovation," she was saying, running her hand over the countertop that Uncle Warren had installed 2 years earlier. "Mom?" I called out, startling the group. "Oh, Brooke, you're home early. These are my friends from the hospital. I was just showing them our lovely home." Our home. Not my home that I was sharing with them, our home. It was a small thing, but it caught my attention. Similar incidents began to pile up. Dad brought his golf buddies over for poker nights, introducing himself as Richard Matthews, recently relocated to the lake as if the house had been his all along. When I overheard him telling someone he'd made some good investments that finally paid off, I felt a knot form in my stomach. My parents began buying expensive things without discussion. A new 70-inch smart TV for the den. Designer clothes filling the closets. My mother's friends were suddenly regular visitors, enjoying wine on the deck while they were served cheese platters that cost more than my entire food budget from my startup days. "Don't you think you guys should be saving money if you're trying to get back on your feet?" I asked one evening after discovering a delivery of high-end golf clubs for my father. "Oh, Brooke," my mother said dismissively, "your father deserves a little joy after all he's been through. Besides, it's not like you can't afford it. Not like I can't afford it. Not like we can't afford it." The distinction was clear, and it bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Stephanie's visits increased, and I began to notice how differently my family interacted when they thought I wasn't around. Once, while working in my home office, I heard their laughter from the kitchen cut off abruptly when I came downstairs. "What's so funny?" I asked. "Nothing important," Stephanie replied quickly. "Just old family stories." Old family stories that apparently didn't include me. At work, things weren't much better. As the new majority shareholder of Matthews Digital Innovations, I was struggling to fill Uncle Warren's enormous shoes. The executive team respected my technical skills, but questioned my leadership capability. My distraction over the family situation wasn't helping. "Brooke, is everything okay?" My project manager, Jessica Parker, asked after I zoned out during an important client meeting. "You seem a million miles away lately." Jessica was one of the few people at the company who treated me like a colleague rather than just Warren's nephew. Her genuine concern made me realize how rarely I'd experienced that kind of authenticity recently. Just some family stuff, I replied vaguely. Family stuff is the most complicated stuff, she said with a knowing smile. If you need to talk, or just grab a coffee and not talk, let me know. That brief interaction highlighted the contrast between my work relationships and what was happening at home. At work, colleagues like Jessica, Tyler Bennett from engineering, and Harold Cooper from sales treated me with straightforward respect. We disagreed sometimes, collaborated often, and genuinely wanted each other to succeed. At home, I increasingly felt like I was part of an elaborate performance where the script was known to everyone but me. One night, I came home to find Stephanie's car in the driveway again. As I approached the patio doors, I heard my name mentioned and paused. "Brooke is so gullible," Stephanie was saying. "He actually thinks—" My father must have noticed me through the window because he suddenly stood up, cutting her off. "Brooke, you're home. We were just talking about you, about how proud we are of how you're handling the company." I smiled and nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the past weeks in my mind. Was I being paranoid? Or was there something more sinister happening beneath the surface of our newfound family harmony? Around this time, I met Autumn Hayes at a charity event for tech education. Unlike most people I'd met since my inheritance, she had no idea who I was or what I was worth. As the director of a nonprofit focused on teaching coding to underprivileged kids, she was more interested in my skills than my bank account. "You look like someone who'd rather be anywhere but at a fundraiser," she said, approaching me at the bar. "Fellow introvert?" Her directness was refreshing. We ended up talking for hours about everything from programming languages to our favorite hiking trails around New England. When I mentioned my family situation in vague terms, she tilted her head thoughtfully. "You know, it's funny how money changes the way people see you, but never changes who they really are," she observed. "It just amplifies what was already there." Her words stayed with me as I began to pay closer attention to my family's behavior. I noticed how they highlighted our connection when it benefited them, like when my father mentioned my son's company to impress his friends, but maintained distance in private, rarely asking about my day or showing interest in my actual life. I began keeping a mental log of discrepancies, the times when their behavior didn't match their words, when conversations stopped when I entered a room, when their stories didn't quite add up. Each instance was small enough to dismiss individually, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. The final straw came when I discovered my mother had given my private cell number to a financial advisor who turned out to be selling questionable investment opportunities. When confronted, she brushed it off. "He's a friend of a friend, very exclusive clientele. I thought I was doing you a favor. Mom, he's running a borderline Ponzi scheme. If I hadn't researched him, I could have lost thousands." She waved away my concern. "Well, you can afford to take a few risks, can't you? With all that money just sitting there? All that money just sitting there. My money. The inheritance that was apparently the only thing they valued about me." That night, I called Marcus. "I think my family is just using me for my inheritance," I admitted, the words painful to say out loud. "No offense, man, but I'm not exactly shocked," Marcus replied. "They ignored you for years when you were struggling. What changed? Not you, just your bank account." Deep down, I knew he was right, but I needed proof, something concrete to either confirm my suspicions or put them to rest once and for all. I just didn't expect that proof to come so soon, or to be so devastatingly clear. The business trip to San Francisco had been scheduled for months, a major client presentation that could potentially double our company's West Coast presence. The morning of my flight, I called home to go over a few household matters with my parents. "I'll be gone for 4 days," I explained. "The housekeeper will come on Wednesday as usual. If you need anything, just call my cell." "Don't worry about us," my mother assured me. "We'll be fine. Just focus on your presentation." "Thanks, Mom. I appreciate that." I paused, then added, "It means a lot having you guys here. I know it's not what you planned, but I'm glad we have this time together." "Of course, sweetie. We're family. We'll talk when you get back." After a quick goodbye, I hung up, or thought I had. In my rush to finish packing, I must have hit the wrong button because the call continued. I was about to end it properly when I heard my father's voice, slightly distant but clear enough. "Is he gone?" "Yes, finally," my mother replied, her tone dramatically different from seconds before. "Living with him is awful, but we're only staying because of his money." I froze, suitcase half-zipped, as my father continued. I know. The way he drones on about his computer nonsense like anyone cares. But we've got to stick it out at least until we get the vacation house. I figure another 6 months of playing happy family should do it. Did you see how pathetic he looked when he said he was glad we're here? My sister, Stephanie's voice now, followed by her laughter. He actually thinks we want to be here. Well, the lake house is nice, my mother conceded, though I'd prefer something in Florida. Do you think we could convince him to buy something there? For the family? Probably, Stephanie replied. He's so desperate for approval, he'll do anything if we pretend to care about him for 5 minutes. Remember when he tried to explain that software thing his company does? My father chuckled. I just kept nodding and thinking about the new boat I'm going to get him to buy. The trick is to mention Warren occasionally, my mother advised. He gets all emotional, and then he's even easier to manipulate. More laughter, then Stephanie's voice again. It's almost too easy. Poor Brooke, always the outsider, always trying so hard to be part of the family. If he only knew what we really think of him, but I did know. Now I knew exactly what they thought of me. I don't remember ending the call. I just remember sitting on the edge of my bed, the phone slipping from my numb fingers, a strange ringing in my ears, as if I'd been too close to an explosion. All those dinners, conversations, moments I'd treasured as signs of a healing family bond all fabricated. Every warm smile, every interested question about my work, every "I'm proud of you, son," all calculated performances designed to keep the money flowing. I made it to the airport somehow, going through security and boarding in a daze. As the plane took off, I stared out the window at Boston growing smaller beneath me, feeling as though I was leaving more than just my home behind. I was leaving behind illusions I'd clung to for far too long. The 3-hour flight passed in a blur. I didn't read, work, or sleep, just sat watching the clouds, occasionally touching my face to find it wet with tears I didn't remember shedding. At the San Francisco hotel, I checked in mechanically and made it to my room before the full impact hit me. Sitting on the edge of the king-sized bed, I finally allowed myself to feel everything: the shock, the betrayal, the grief, and beneath it all, a simmering anger that surprised me with its intensity. I'd given them everything, not just material things, but chance after chance to be the family I needed, and they'd taken it all while laughing behind my back. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Landed safely? Team dinner at 7 if you're up for it." I couldn't face anyone, not in this state. I sent a quick reply claiming jet lag, then turned my phone off completely. The silence of the hotel room pressed in around me as hours ticked by. Around midnight, I finally turned my phone back on and called the one person I knew would understand. "They never cared, Marcus," I said when he answered, my voice cracking. "Not about me, just the money." "Aw, man," he sighed, the sadness in his voice matching my own. "I'm so sorry. What happened?" I told him everything. The accidental call, the cruel laughter, the calculated manipulation. Saying it out loud made it even more painful, but also more real, impossible to dismiss as paranoia or misunderstanding. "You need to confront them," Marcus said when I finished. "You can't let them keep using you like this." "I know. I need time to think, to figure out what to do. Whatever you decide, I've got your back. You know that, right?" I know. And I did know. Marcus had been there through the ramen noodle days, the failed startups, the late-night coding sessions. He'd never changed how he treated me, before the money or after. "Get some sleep if you can," he advised. "Things will look clearer in the morning." But sleep didn't come. I spent the night pacing my hotel room, replaying not just the phone call but years of interactions with my family, seeing them in a new, harsh light. By dawn, I felt hollow, emptied out of everything except one certainty. Things couldn't continue as they had been. Something had to change, and that something was me. The client meeting was scheduled for 9 the next morning. Somehow, I showered, dressed, and made it to the downtown office building on time, operating on autopilot. Jessica was waiting in the lobby, her usual energetic self. "Ready to knock their socks off?" she asked, handing me a coffee. "Absolutely," I lied, taking a sip and trying to force my brain to focus on the task at hand. The presentation started well enough. I went through the slides we'd prepared, describing our company's capabilities and vision. But when the potential client began asking detailed questions about implementation timelines, my mind went blank. "Brooke?" Jessica prompted after an uncomfortable silence. "I'm sorry," I stammered. Could you repeat the question? The client exchanged concerned glances with his team. Perhaps we should take a short break, he suggested. In the hallway, Jessica pulled me aside. What's going on? This isn't like you. I hesitated, then gave her a simplified version of what had happened. Her expression shifted from concern to outrage on my behalf. That's horrible, she said. Look, why don't you let me handle the rest of the meeting? Go get some air, clear your head. I can't just leave. You can, and you should. This is important, but so is your well-being. I've got this. Her kindness nearly broke me. I nodded gratefully and slipped out while she returned to salvage the meeting. San Francisco was cool and foggy, perfect weather for wandering aimlessly through streets that held no memories or expectations. I found myself at Pier 39, watching sea lions bask in the pale sunlight, their barking oddly comforting in its simplicity and honesty. My phone buzzed Jessica. We saved it. They're cautiously optimistic and want another meeting next month. No thanks to you, she added, but I could hear the smile in her voice. Take the rest of the day. We'll regroup tomorrow. I spent the afternoon walking miles through the city, from the Embarcadero to Golden Gate Park, trying to exhaust my body enough that my mind might quiet. As the sun began to set, I found myself in a small bar near Union Square, nursing a whiskey, and finally allowing myself to think clearly about what came next. The bartender, a man about my father's age with kind eyes, noticed my expression. That's either a broken heart or a betrayal face, he commented as he wiped down the bar. Seen plenty of both in this job. Is there a difference? I asked. He considered this. Broken hearts heal cleaner. Betrayals leave different scars. He slid a bowl of pretzels toward me. Want to talk about it? No charge for the amateur therapy. I surprised myself by telling this stranger a condensed version of my situation. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding in recognition. My old man used to say, "You never really know someone until you see what they do with power or money," he said when I finished. Sounds like your family showed their true colors when the cash appeared. I just don't know what to do now. Yes, you do, he countered, refilling my glass. You just don't want to do it because it hurts. But continuing like this, that'll hurt worse in the long run. He was right. Deep down, I knew exactly what needed to happen. I just needed the courage to follow through. Back at the hotel, I found myself calling Autumn. We'd only met recently, but something about her straightforward nature made her easier to talk to than people I'd known for years. I'm not surprised, she said after hearing my story. Sad for you, but not surprised. People who value wealth over relationships usually make it obvious in small ways before the big reveal. What would you do? I asked. I'd set boundaries and stick to them, she replied without hesitation. Look, Brooke, you've been given an incredible gift from your uncle, but the biggest gift might be this clarity about who truly cares about you. Not everyone deserves access to your life just because they share your DNA. We talked for over an hour, her perspective helping me see my situation with new eyes. By the time we hung up, the outline of a plan was forming in my mind. The next morning, I called Leonard Goldman. I need to understand my options regarding the house and my family's current living situation, I explained. From a legal perspective, you're on solid ground, he assured me after I explained the situation. The property is solely in your name. You have no legal obligation to house or support your parents. And if I wanted to provide some financial assistance but not maintain the current arrangement, there are several ways to structure that. Why don't you come see me when you're back in Boston? We can discuss the details. Next, I called my financial advisor and asked him to prepare an analysis of what a reasonable one-time settlement for my parents might look like, enough to help them restart their lives, but not enough to fund the lavish lifestyle they'd made for my parents. Been planning at my expense. As these practical pieces fell into place, I found my emotional state shifting as well. The paralyzing shock gave way to a steadier resolve. I extended my San Francisco trip by 3 days, using the time to fully prepare for what would come next. I spent hours in the hotel business center, documenting every manipulative incident I could recall, from small comments to larger deceptions. I reviewed my credit card statements, noting the thousands of dollars in charges my parents had racked up without discussion. I even drafted scripts for the confrontation, knowing my tendency to back down in emotional situations with my family. On my final night in San Francisco, I had dinner with Jessica and 2 other colleagues, Tyler and Harold, who had flown in for additional meetings. Their normal, respectful treatment of me, professional but warm, honest in both agreement and disagreement, highlighted how abnormal my family dynamic truly was. To Brooke, Jessica toasted, raising her glass, for building a killer West Coast strategy despite personal distractions. And for having the guts to make tough calls when needed, added Harold, who knew nothing of my situation but had seen me make difficult business decisions. Their confidence in me reinforced what I was beginning to accept. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. I'd spent years trying to earn love and respect that should have been freely given from people incapable of providing it. As the plane touched down in Boston the next day, I felt different, lighter somehow, despite the weight of what lay ahead. I'd left San Francisco with more than a successful business trip. I'd found a clarity and conviction that had eluded me for years. My family had shown me who they really were. Now it was time to show them who I had become. I didn't call ahead to announce my return. Instead of heading home immediately, I checked into a hotel near the airport and spent a final evening reviewing my plan. The next day was Saturday, perfect timing, as my parents rarely left the house on weekends. Around 2 in the afternoon, I pulled into the driveway behind 3 unfamiliar cars. Through the large windows facing the lake, I could see a gathering in progress, my parents entertaining guests in my home, as had become their custom. I used my key quietly and stood in the foyer, listening to my father's voice carrying from the great room. "We're thinking of adding a boathouse next spring. The architect says the property is perfect for it. Richard has such an eye for real estate," my mother added. "This place has already appreciated considerably since we acquired it." I stepped into the doorway, making my presence known. The conversation halted abruptly as 5 pairs of eyes turned toward me. "Brooke!" my mother exclaimed, recovering quickly. "What a surprise! We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "Clearly," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Would you mind if I spoke with my family privately? I'm sure your guests won't mind cutting things short." The confusion and discomfort were palpable as the 3 visitors gathered their things and made awkward farewells. My father maintained a stiff smile until the front door closed behind them. "That was incredibly rude," he snapped once we were alone. "The Andersons are very influential people." "We need to talk," I said, ignoring his complaint. "All of us." "Can't it wait?" "I'm sure you're tired from your trip," my mother suggested, her eyes darting nervously to my father. "No, it can't wait. Please sit down." Reluctantly, they took seats on the leather sofa while I remained standing. Stephanie started to say something, but I held up my hand. "Before you speak, you should know that I heard everything," I said, my voice remarkably calm. "The phone call didn't disconnect. I heard what you said about living with me being awful, about only staying for my money, about manipulating me into buying you a vacation home." The color drained from my mother's face. My father attempted to maintain his composure, but I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. "Brooke, you misunderstood," he began. "No, I didn't. He's so desperate for approval, he'll do anything if we pretend to care about him for 5 minutes. That's what Stephanie said. Hard to misunderstand that." Stephanie's expression shifted from shock to a strange defensiveness. "You were eavesdropping on a private conversation?" "Accidentally, but I'm glad I did. It saved me from wasting any more time believing this was a real family reconciliation." My mother's strategy shifted to tears. "How can you say that? After all we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked quietly. "Since I invited you to live in my home, what have you contributed besides criticism and extravagant spending of my money?" "We're your parents," my father declared, as if that settled everything. "We raised you, put a roof over your head, food on the table. Yes, you did the basic minimum required by law," I acknowledged, "and then spent years making me feel like a failure because I chose a different path than you wanted. The only person who ever believed in me was Uncle Warren, and you resented him for it." "That's not fair," my mother started. "What's not fair is listening to my own family laugh about using me," I cut in, my voice finally betraying some emotion. "What's not fair is realizing that the people who should love me unconditionally only value me for what I can give them." I pulled out a folder containing the documents I'd prepared. "I've spoken with my attorney and financial advisor. You have 2 options." I laid out the papers on the coffee table. Option 1. You leave with dignity and a one-time settlement of $500,000, enough to pay off your debts and start fresh. Option 2. You leave with nothing except what you brought with you. The stunned silence that followed was broken by my father's indignant sputter. "You can't be serious. We're your family." "No," I said quietly. "Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't laugh at someone's pain. Marcus is more family to me than you've ever been." "This is ridiculous," Stephanie interjected. "You're overreacting to a few careless comments. We were just blowing off steam." "If that were true, I might believe you. But it's not just what you said on the phone. It's every dismissive comment, every time you took credit for my success, every secret plan you made to extract more money from me. It's a pattern, not an isolated incident." My mother switched tactics, her tears vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. "You've changed since getting this money. It's gone to your head. Your uncle would be disappointed in how you're treating us. That was a mistake. Uncle Warren saw through you years ago. He told me once that some people measure others by what they can get from them, not by who they are. He was talking about you." My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You ungrateful after everything we've sacrificed. You'd throw your own parents out on the street?" "I'm offering you $500,000, I replied calmly. "That's hardly the street. It's more generosity than you've shown me." "We'll fight this," he threatened. "We have rights." "No, you don't. Not legally. This is my house. You are guests who have overstayed their welcome. You have 24 hours to decide which option you're taking and 48 hours to leave either way." I turned to go, but Stephanie grabbed my arm. "Brooke, be reasonable. We're the only family you have. You're really going to throw that away?" I looked at her hand on my arm, then into her eyes. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just finally seeing what was never there to begin with." The next 48 hours were tense. My parents vacillated between threats, guilt trips, and occasional attempts at reconciliation. "We can work this out as a family," but I remained resolute. In the end, they took the money, as I knew they would. Watching them pack their belongings was surreal. My mother cried real tears this time, but I couldn't tell if they were for the loss of her son or the loss of the lifestyle she'd been enjoying. My father maintained a cold silence, speaking only to confirm details of the settlement transfer. Stephanie left first, giving me one last wounded look that might have worked a month ago, but now seemed as calculated as everything else. "I hope you're happy," she said at the door, tearing the family apart. "The family was never whole to begin with," I replied. "At least now we're being honest about it." As my parents' car pulled away, loaded with suitcases and boxes, I stood on the porch feeling a complex mixture of emotions: grief for what might have been, relief that it was over, and a strange, unexpected sense of liberation. The house felt enormous in their absence. I walked through the rooms, noticing how they'd left behind subtle damages: a scratch on the antique desk, a wine stain on the carpet they'd tried to hide, a broken hinge on the guest room door. Small wounds, like the ones they'd inflicted on my sense of self-worth for years. That night, Marcus came over with pizza and beer. We sat on the deck overlooking the lake, the same spot where my family had planned their manipulations. "How are you holding up?" he asked as the sun set over the water. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "Part of me wonders if I was too harsh." Marcus shook his head. "You gave them $500,000 after they admitted to using you. That's not harsh, that's still being too generous." Jessica and Tyler stopped by the next evening with Chinese food and workplace gossip to distract me. Autumn called to check in, her practical warmth a balm to my still raw emotions. "The first step to building a healthy life is clearing out what's toxic," she said, especially when it's painful. As days turned into weeks, the ache began to dull. I started making the house truly mine, rearranging furniture, replacing items that held uncomfortable memories, creating a space that reflected my values rather than my parents' pretensions. At work, freed from the constant drain of maintaining the family charade, my performance improved. The executive team began to see me as a leader in my own right, not just Warren's nephew. We secured the San Francisco client and expanded our West Coast presence even beyond our initial goals. I found myself sleeping better, laughing more easily, breathing more deeply. It wasn't that the pain had disappeared, it was that it no longer defined me. 6 months passed. The lake sparkled with early morning light as I sipped coffee on the deck, reflecting on how much had changed. The house that had once felt like a stage set for my family's performance now felt genuinely like home. In that time, I'd transformed more than just my living space. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to recognize authentic connections, to value quality of relationship over quantity. I'd built a chosen family of friends who showed up not for what I could give them, but for who I was. Marcus remained my steadfast friend, the brother I'd never had by blood but found in loyalty. Jessica and I had developed a professional partnership that made our department the company's most innovative. Harold and Tyler had become regular guests for our monthly poker nights, where the stakes were low but the conversation was rich. Autumn and I had grown closer, our friendship deepening into something neither of us was rushing to define but both valued deeply. Her perspective as someone who worked with underprivileged kids gave me insight into using my inheritance in ways Uncle Warren would have approved. "Money is just potential energy," she said once as we hiked along the lake shores. "It doesn't do anything until you convert it to kinetic energy, action, change, impact." Taking her words to heart, I established the Warren Matthews Technology Education Fund, providing scholarships and equipment to students who showed promise in programming but lacked resources. It felt like the perfect way to honor the man who had believed in me when no one else did. The first cohort of 20 students began their training that fall. Watching them discover the joy of creating something from nothing but code reminded me of my own early passion, before family expectations and disappointments had complicated everything. "My uncle used to say the future belongs to the builders," I told them at orientation. "I believe each of you has something unique to build." I hadn't heard from my parents directly since they left, though occasional updates filtered through distant relatives. They had bought a modest condo in Florida with part of the settlement and were reportedly telling everyone they'd downsized by choice for retirement. Stephanie had apparently joined a prestigious medical practice in Chicago, putting physical distance between herself and the family fallout. Then came the restaurant encounter I'd been subconsciously dreading but knew was inevitable in a city like Boston. I was having dinner with Marcus and Autumn when I looked up to see my parents and sister being seated across the room. The moment of recognition was mutual and awkward. My mother lifted her hand in a hesitant wave. My father nodded stiffly. Stephanie studiously examined her menu. "Want to leave?" Marcus asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, I'm not going to run." After dinner, as we waited for the valet, my father approached alone. "You look well," he said, hands in his pockets. "Thank you." "So do you." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled with all the words neither of us knew how to say. "Your mother asks about you," he finally offered. "Wonders how you're doing." "I'm doing well. Very well, actually." He nodded, glancing back at where my mother and Stephanie waited by the restaurant door. "That fund you started, the technology education thing. It was in the business section. Sounds like something Warren would have liked." That was the idea. Another silence. Then, "Perhaps we could have coffee sometime, just to catch up." I studied his face, looking for signs of the old calculation, the manipulation. What I saw instead was something I hadn't expected: uncertainty, maybe even regret. "Perhaps," I replied. "Not committing but not refusing. You have my number." He nodded and walked back to my mother and sister. I watched them leave, surprised by how little their presence affected me now. The power they had once held over my emotions had diminished, not through anger or resentment, but through the simple process of growth and distance. A week later, my father called. The conversation was stilted, surface-level weather, the Red Sox season, neutral topics that couldn't lead to conflict. He didn't apologize, but he didn't ask for anything either, which itself felt like a kind of progress. "Would you like to meet for that coffee?" he asked near the end of the call. I hesitated, then made a decision based not on who he had been to me, but on who I wanted to be. "I'm free next Thursday afternoon." The coffee meeting was neither a disaster nor a breakthrough. Just two people trying to navigate a damaged relationship with new boundaries. When he suggested meeting again the following month, I agreed, but with clear limits: just him, not my mother or Stephanie, not at my home, and with no expectations beyond conversation. As I built this cautious new connection with my father, I was simultaneously deepening more authentic relationships elsewhere in my life. Autumn and I finally acknowledged what our friends had seen for months, that we were more than friends. Marcus teased me mercilessly about how long it had taken us to figure it out. "Some genius programmer you are," he joked. "Couldn't even debug your own love life." The company continued to thrive under my leadership, which had evolved from Uncle Warren's shadow into something distinctly mine, more collaborative, more focused on emerging technologies. We expanded our mentorship program, bringing in promising developers from non-traditional backgrounds. That Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after the phone call that changed everything, I hosted dinner at the lake house. Not for my biological family, but for the family I had chosen. Marcus, Autumn, Jessica and her husband, Tyler and his boyfriend, Harold and his daughter, 2 of Uncle Warren's old friends who'd become my mentors, and even Leonard Goldman, whose wise counsel had helped me through the darkest days. As we gathered around the table overlooking the lake, I took a moment to appreciate how different this felt from family gatherings of the past. There was no underlying tension, no need to perform or prove my worth. Just genuine connection, respect, and affection. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To Uncle Warren, who taught me that success isn't measured by what you have, but by who you become and what you build, not just in code or business, but in relationships." "To Warren," they echoed, glasses raised. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Autumn joined me on the deck. The night was clear and cold. Stars reflected in the still water of the lake. "Happy?" she asked, slipping her hand into mine. I considered the question seriously. "Yes," I said finally, "not because everything's perfect, but because I'm no longer trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it freely." "That's a hard lesson to learn," she observed. "Some people never do." "I was lucky," I replied. "I got to see the truth clearly, painfully, but clearly. It hurt, but it also set me free." As we stood there under the vast New England sky, I thought about the journey of the past year. The betrayal had nearly broken me. But through that breaking had come a rebuilding stronger than before. I had lost the family I thought I wanted, but gained a deeper understanding of what family truly meant. Sometimes the most painful revelations bring the greatest gifts if we have the courage to face them honestly and grow through them rather than around them. My parents had forgotten to hang up the phone, but in doing so, they had inadvertently given me the truth I needed to finally hang up on the false hope that had kept me trapped for years. Have you ever discovered that someone wasn't who you thought they were? How did you handle that revelation? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and growth. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the family you're born into. Until next time, this is Brooke Matthews, signing off.